Looks like most people that were in the queue have been let in the room. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining our call. This is an investor update meeting where you'll hear from Paige Tucker, CEO, Louis Succi, CTO, and Pat Clausen. Pat was unfortunately delayed on his flight out this morning, and so he'll be joining the meeting in progress. And if he's not here in time, Paige is going to go over his slides. And without further ado, and there will be Q&A at the end. So without further ado, over to you, Paige.
Thank you very much. Garrett, can you go to the next slide? I appreciate everyone joining the meeting, and I hope that as we go through our presentation and share with you the information that you're as optimistic and as excited as we are, and that we're demonstrating some serious traction with the focus on driving revenue and onboarding what we call logos. We've added a significant amount of customers, especially in Q1, and it looks like Q2 will actually increase the amount of logos we're adding. So we're starting to recognize traction in the market. I think a lot of it has to do with the convergence of several catalysts that are starting to drive adoption. As we know, the construction industry is slow on adoption. They're known as a lagger, and there's no way of trying to determine the timing of when we might start to see adoption in the market. But I think we can demonstrate now, based on the amount of customers that we're adding, that we're starting to see serious traction and potentially getting to what we consider to be an inflection point. And as I go through my presentation, I hope you're as encouraged as we are. Garrett, can you go to the next slide, please? As Joel mentioned, I'll be presenting, as well as Louis, who, as you know, is our new CTO, and Pat Clausen, who is also our Director of Sales and a board member. As you know, we brought both Louis and Pat on board last year, and they have made significant contributions to the company. One of Louis's focus and expertise is in driving automation and streamlining operations, which he's been very effective and successful in doing. In fact, we've driven what was our operational overhead costs last year from a little bit over $6 million down to almost $4 million due to Louis's efforts. In addition to that, we brought Pat in, who has a proven track record and a system that he puts into place to drive profitability and record revenues. And Pat's system is starting to pay serious dividends. And I'll let Pat go through the success of his system, but we're starting to realize a significant amount of increase, not only in the amount of customers that we're onboarding, but revenue as well. And we expect that to continue and increase throughout the year. Next. You're all aware of the current process, and I want to elaborate on this a little bit, because there's a lot of changes that are taking place in the market, as I mentioned, which are catalysts, which are starting to pull our technology into the market, where over the last several years, we've had to push our technology into the market. You all know that in every state and in every province in Canada, they have what's called a one-call center, where you're required by law to call into the center and notify where you're going to be doing construction that requires digging activity. As we go through the presentation, you'll see that we're starting to integrate into the one-call ticket management systems, which is a major driver. You're also going to see, in addition to that, some technologies that have been integrated into these locate devices, which are also driving adoption of PointMan. Next. You're all aware that because they don't trust the paint marks, they also bring in these large hydrovac trucks which, as you know, drill a hole in the ground and suck the dirt out through those giant vacuum systems in an attempt to actually expose where the utilities are. This is a very arduous process and very expensive, can cost between $1,000 to $2,500 a hole. As we go through the presentation, you'll also see that we're in discussions with the hydrovac truck operators because they're actually exposing where the utility and pipeline is located. And we're in discussions with them about utilizing PointMan now to capture that information when the pipeline is exposed. And again, working with the equipment manufacturers on the locating devices and the hydrovac equipment is starting to drive sales of our PointMan application. Next. As I had discussed before, the whole process and workflow processes on how you manage the data can take up to 2 weeks. And of course, with PointMan, we automate that process and got it down to 1 second. So the historical way of doing it is you'd locate where the utility is, put the paint marks down, or you would hydrovac, drill a hole in the ground, and then you'd send the surveyors out to survey the paint mark or the hole in the ground. Today, with the American Society for Civil Engineers, they no longer consider a paint mark on the ground where a utility is located. In addition to that, with PointMan, what we're actually doing is replacing the need to send the surveyors out there and use the survey equipment. And that's where the adoption has been slow, because a lot of these engineering and surveying firms did not believe that we could automate the surveying process on a mobile device. But we're starting to realize adoption by some of the largest engineering and surveying firms, not only in the United States, but also abroad, that are using our technology to replace the engineer and the surveyor, as well as the surveying equipment. Once the data was captured, then they would have to upload it onto a PC out in the field, review the data, and then manually import it into a CAD or GIS system. The leader in GIS is Esri, and in CAD, it's Autodesk and Bentley. As we go through the presentation, you'll see that now even the service providers that create the CAD systems and the GIS systems have actually opened up their API to us, where at a click of a button, it seamlessly populates the CAD and GIS system. Again, this is a major change in the industry where these manufacturers of the software and hardware have opened up their API to us to even increase the efficiencies and streamline the entire process in making this information available. Next. Of course, that's why we created PointMan, and it's taken us years to convince the industry that we can replace that arduous workflow process and those systems of record and do surveying on a mobile device and make that information available in 1 second. But we have enough influencers in the industry that have adopted our software that this is becoming basically a standard in the industry, and our brand awareness in the market is increasingly growing, and no one has to question now if this works, where historically what they would have to do is run a pilot, see if it worked, test it on various projects, and then they would adopt it. Where we are today is we're recognized as the leader in the market, and that this works, and people are buying it, and they don't have to test it. And we have significantly reduced our closing cycle from what used to be a year down to some cases just to a matter of days. Next. We all know how this works. So you take the utility locate device, and through Bluetooth technology, you pair it to the mobile device. And then what was required historically is to use an external GPS. And then once the information was captured, it went up to the cloud, where we put it through our proprietary processes and then made that information available to whoever needed that information, either in the field or in the office, as I mentioned, in a matter of seconds. Garrett, you can go to the next one. What that meant is that it required that you couple the GPS receiver to the locate device and then capture the information on the mobile device. And then that information was available in the cloud, which meant anybody can view the data from the office or in the field. With the American Society for Civil Engineers, what they've done is they said, you no longer have to have an engineer or a surveyor out in the field to qualify this data if you're using PointMan. The engineer or the surveyor can sit in the office and watch the locators collect this data. And based on the precision and the pedigree that we're capturing, they can determine from the office if this meets survey grade standards, which is a major change in the industry. In addition to that, as I mentioned, we had to couple a GPS receiver onto the locate device. So there was 3 pieces of equipment. You had to have the locate device. You also had to spend additional resources to get a GPS receiver coupled to the locate device. And then you had to have the mobile device. As we go to the next slide, that knowing that what we did initially was went out and we had tested this with Kiewit, as you know, and then we tested it with CDOT, got adoption. Garrett, go to the next slide. Then we spent a couple of years working with the large engineering and surveying firms, building all the workflow processes to meet the needs of the large construction company, a government agency, as well as large engineering surveying firms, including in Canada, United States, as well as Australia. Once we completed all of that development, we knew that it would meet the needs of any stakeholder that was involved in managing or maintaining utilities, which includes energy companies, municipalities, heavy highway construction companies, mining companies. So today we have a presence in every industry sector that's impacted by not knowing where utilities and pipelines are. And as a result of bringing Pat in, we went from having about a dozen customers last year to where we are today. We have over 80. So we're starting to see significant traction in the market. In fact, we had 23 customers onboarded last quarter, and our goal is to bring on 30 this quarter. It's the first time ever. We closed the deal on Monday. We closed 2 on Wednesday. We closed 1 yesterday. We expect to close another one today. So as we're demonstrating that we are reaching a point where, as opposed to having to push this technology into the market, it's actually being pulled into the market. The industry realizes that we're going through a digital transformation, and that digital mapping is going to be a major component of the services that they provide. And that's why we're starting to realize the amount of traction that we're getting and onboarding customers at an increasing rate, which I expect to continue to increase each quarter throughout the balance of the year. Next. One of the major signings that we just did, and this is a big influencer in the market, is that we just onboarded Stake Center. I expect to put out a press release next week. Stake Center is the 2nd largest utility locating company in the country. Now, historically, these companies are paid to put paint marks on the ground, and they're paid based on how many paint marks they put on the ground. Stake Center is going to be the first national locating company that is going to go out and digitally capture, using PointMan, where the utility and pipeline is located, and then provide that information back to the stakeholder, which is either the utility or pipeline company that owns the assets, so that they can reference the data being provided and rectify their internal records. Because 95% of the records that these utility and pipeline companies have of where their assets are located are geospatially inaccurate. I'm convinced that once one of these large national utility locating companies starts to digitally capture where the information is and provide that information back to the stakeholder, all the other major utility companies are going to have to follow suit. And you can see that Stake Center is in all 48 of the lower states. They have 1,000 locators, and they do over 850,000 locates per month. As a result of signing Stake Center, we're now in discussions with Gridhawk, which is the third largest locating company in the country. And they have committed that they're going to adopt PointMan and start on one project in Texas that is going to get underway here pretty quickly. So you can see that we're starting to get adoption by the major firms in the market. These are key influencers. And being a disruptive technology, once one of these major companies adopts a new technology, and it increases their efficiencies and the deliverables that they provide to their customers, then the rest will follow suit. Next. You know that we're integrated into all the major equipment manufacturers now that provide the GPS equipment or the electromagnetic locating devices. And as I mentioned previously, what you had to do historically was you had to have the external GPS receiver, and then you had to Bluetooth that to the locate device, which means you had two different pieces of equipment, which made it a little bit more cumbersome and expensive. And we knew that at some point, one of these major manufacturers would integrate the GPS device right into the locate device. Radio detection is the largest manufacturer. Oh, sorry, Garrett, go back. Radio detection is the largest manufacturer in the world of the utility and pipeline locating devices. And then you can go to the next one. They've taken the GPS receiver and integrated it right into the locate device. This is the RD8200 SG. Again, this is a major game changer in the market and a catalyst. The only reason to integrate precision GPS into the locate device is because you're not going to be putting paint marks down. You actually want to digitally capture the precise location of where that utility and pipeline is located. On the right-hand side, I took a snapshot from their training manual, and you can see within their training manual, it's PointMan that they are promoting as the mobile mapping software solution to use with the RD8200. In fact, we've trained 80 of their salespeople worldwide. I just met with their director, which in the UK, that's their CEO, who flew out to meet us on Wednesday. And we're going to start ramping up the sales of PointMan with the RD8200. And you'll start seeing all types of advertisements on social media, including LinkedIn, Google Ads, on Twitter, that radio detection is going to be promoting PointMan. As a result of that, all the other equipment manufacturers now realize that they want PointMan also embedded into their devices. And I'll let Lewis discuss the hardware manufacturers that we're integrating into. But this is a major opportunity for us because it becomes a distribution channel for us where we can utilize their sales and marketing to promote PointMan, not only in the United States and Canada, but worldwide. Next. I had mentioned before that the American Society for Civil Engineers changed their guidelines and standards based on PointMan, that a paint mark is no longer considered to be where a utility or pipeline is located, and that if you have the information that PointMan can provide, you no longer have to have an engineer or a surveyor on the project site to determine if it's survey grade. This is a key catalyst in the market because the industry is now adopting what's called subsurface utility engineering standards, which are created by the American Society for Civil Engineers, and they have endorsed PointMan as a software that you can utilize for surveying without having survey equipment or a surveyor on site. Next. Our pricing. What we did in Q1, just to get some traction in the market, is we had our pricing at $995, where you could buy PointMan Pro for $995. I just wanted to see if that would create an uptick in sales, which it did. But then what we did about a week ago is we increased our price up to $4,950, which is what we're selling it at right now. So we've increased our pricing as well. So you can start out at $4,950, and then each additional license is $995. Most of the clients, because this is still relatively new technology, will start out at the $4,950, and they'll test it on one project. And if it's effective, then they'll start to push it out throughout their organization on multiple projects. And we're starting to realize that with some of our clients that are national clients, including Kramer, Kokosing, companies like Kiewit, some of the major engineering and surveying firms like KCI and T2, where they will start on one particular project to test it and see if it actually does what we say it can do. And then when they realize the power and the efficiencies that it creates for them, then they start to push it out onto other projects. I bring that up because within our own customer base, I'm pretty confident that the amount of expansion within our current customer base could be easily 200 to 300%, because they're only starting out with, say, 3 or 4 or 5 applications on one particular project. But some of these companies have, a range of anywhere between 300 to 1,000 clients. Use Stake Center, for example. They're putting this out on one project. They're using, I think, 7 licenses. They're paying us about $10,000 on one project. And then if this is effective on the one project, they want all 1,000 of their locators to be utilizing this application. Next. So at this point, what I would like to do is have Lewis explain what he's doing as far as streamlining our workflow processes, creating automation, and also all the various other technology providers that want Pointman to be part of their services that they're offering to their customers.
Hey, Paige, this is Pat. Would you mind if I went next just with flight connections so that we're not too rushed?
Oh, good.
Would that be
Pat,
okay?
that's great, because I knew we explained that you were having some issues on traveling and stuff like that. Yeah, Garrett, can you go down to Pat, please? Then we'll come back to Lewis.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, everybody, and I appreciate the patience because I am sitting here at Charlotte. Garrett, if you can go to the next slide, that'd be fantastic. We are a SaaS company, guys. We are a 95% gross margin company. We're looking for long-term operating margins that are at 75% with a very, very low churn on our customers. So right now, we're not experiencing churn. It is a part of the SaaS world eventually. We'd like to keep it at 3% or less. Next slide, please. To give you a sense of last year, we had an escalating, so this is not marketing, this is the sales organization and their outreaches. So we started in Q1 and we escalated throughout the balance of the year. We achieved 92,000, almost 93,000 outreaches, 514 held brand new discovery calls with prospects, 240 demos, and you guys can see the math. We did 139 quotes and we closed 55 deals. With the 23% demo to deal ratio, Q1 was extraordinary. Almost 82,000 outreaches in Q1 alone, 337 new scheduled or held discovery calls. Put out 89 quotes. We closed 23 brand new cloud deals with a 47% conversion ratio. 3, sales development reps doing a lot of that work into the outside sales organization, helping us get that done. Before we move to the next slide, I think it's really important that, our as Paige said, we're above 80 cloud customers now. Our goal for Q2 is getting to 30 brand new customers in this quarter, which is another massive step forward. If you go to the next slide, I thought I'd give you all a bit of look at what we do back here. So there's a lot of sales activities, but I focus on the higher value sales activities, which is when we get that first appointment. You can see that escalation in our meeting with these new prospects, and how that's gone from Q1 of last year into a very steady high volume pace, and the other activities, getting evals created and new cloud accounts closed. The next slide, I'm sorry, kind of illustrates that on the new cloud customers closed per quarter. So we have been really amping our ability to engage and close customers with a shorter sales cycle, and bring them on, and help Paige get to that. 100 cloud customers, which I suspect we are going to do very shortly. We've had a really strong growth in cloud customer sales. We saw year-over-year 43% in sequential growth, 229%. We're really just at the very beginning of fueling that engine and moving people through the sales pipeline. And we're also starting to work much larger transactions, as Paige has alluded to. You go to the next slide. This is kind of my coup de grace slide. People ask us what our TAM is, right? And I just use a number because I don't think anybody does it properly. Every year, there's over 500,000 utility strikes in the US alone. Remember, we're a global company. $30 billion in damages, and people die every year. Below is a quote from the National Underground Asset Registry Advisory Group. So that 50 people have died in the last 20 years just in the US alone. Our current sales pipeline is sitting around 3.3 million for sequential growth of 154% of the beginning of the year pipeline. We have 2.4 million in large deal opportunities and around 900,000 in our regular transactional pipeline. And it's expected to grow, over 8 million by the end of 2024. So we continue to drive very real transactions, and we're closing those transactions at a high pace. Next slide. I think that's my last.
Yep, that's your last slide.
Thank you very much. I'll go back on mute, Paige.
Thank you very much, Pat. Yeah, let's go back up to Lewis, and we can go through where we are with all of the technology integrations that he's done, and also creating and improving on the online store.
Great, thanks, Paige. We can go to the next slide. Thanks, Garrett. So this was just maybe some housekeeping from last time we had talked. We had talked about and Paige alluded to some cost improvements that were in the works in late last year, early part of this year. Just wanted to provide an update. This was actually the same slide I used last time. Just provide an update here that all this work has been completed. We had plans that we went through last time. We've now since completed all those plans. And so all this sort of cost optimization, I guess as Paige alluded to, has been completed. Garrett, if you want to go to the next slide. The other big initiative we had at the end of last year was the implementation of a online e-commerce store, or an updated online e-commerce store. We partnered with a company called Chargebeat to help with the implementation of that. That's now also complete. It went live in middle of December of last year. And so we do have a little bit of performance data on that store that we can share. I think the most striking and pertinent number there is we've seen sales that have been done and executed through the store compared to sort of classic accounts receivables, invoicing methods, increased by over 100% in Q1 alone. So there's been some great adoption by our customer base of sort of the ease of use of buying online through sort of standard e-commerce practices. If we head to the next slide. We can talk here about our relationships with our partners, both on the hardware and software side. What we're really trying to do around this particular part of our roadmap is make Pointman as easy as possible to use within the software and hardware ecosystems that our customers have. And so we definitely put a lot of time and energy in sort of working with key and important partners, right? I'll start at the top here. Leica and Topcon, as I'm sure everybody knows, are extremely large players in the space. And so they've got quite a few divisions. And so we've definitely done work with them on things like locators and GPS integration through the quarters, and continuing to expand the models that we have support from them. But we've also seen a little bit of a shift there in that we're now having many more conversations with them about how we can take part in other parts of their businesses, right? So, in terms of things like risk management, or integration with heavy equipment in the field. Companies like Leica and Topcon have software and hardware products in other spaces beyond just the traditional locate hardware, and we're in sort of deep conversations with them, and they're beginning to do work on how we can leverage Pointman and how our shared customers can leverage Pointman in places beyond that go into things like risk management and asset protection. The other change we've seen on the hardware manufacturer side, and we've got Juniper and Bad Elf here as an example, is when companies who do kind of specialize more in locate equipment or in GPS equipment, as they're going to market, Pointman's becoming a more important part of their go-to-market motion. So on more and more cases, the relationship is changing in a way that they're actually coming to us ahead of launching new products in the market, coordinating with us to ensure the new devices have compatibility in our software suite before they launch them into the marketplace. And so this has been sort of like a new thing we've seen in a change in behavior that we've seen from our partners in the last 3 or 4 months. Then on the software side, there's a couple of different things going on. One is we've got Propeller mentioned here. So for those who don't know, Propeller is a software product, a SaaS solution that integrates drone mapping, right? So they've got hardware that they'll send out to a site, fly overhead, create overhead views of a job site or a dig site or a pipeline or whatever it is, and then they store it in their cloud. So we're working with them on integration between that and Pointman itself, right? And the real intent there is to provide users in that space with a frictionless, holistic view of both the above ground and underground data and mapping of their property, right? So you can, in the combination of using both Propeller and Pointman, you'll have access in a single place, both what information is, or sorry, the location of things and the status of things above ground, as well as all of the utility infrastructure underground. We're also working with companies like Esri and Autodesk and Bentley to tie our software more closely into their products and their ecosystems as well. This is really about removal of friction when data needs to be moved between our system and these are the common systems that get used downstream in sort of data processing, if you will. And so a lot of work going on behind the scenes there around making it easy for our customers to move data around and get it into the places where their existing processes need it to be as efficient as possible. And then kind of the last point there, sorry, we go back to the last slide. As Paige had mentioned, 811 has been another area where there's been a lot of interest in the last 3 or 4 months, and we've got conversations ongoing both with Earth and Proterra at the moment on integration of Pointman and their sort of workforce management products out in the field. So if you're a company that is doing say locating out in the field, you might be using Earth or Proterra to schedule which crew is actually going out on site to do the work. And so how do we sort of create deep integrations and sort of a very frictionless workflow where hey, here's as someone out in the field, as a survey engineer, it's, hey, here's where to go, and then very quickly and easily get from here's where to go to now I'm on the job site. I can move seamlessly directly into Pointman, create or sort of satisfy the requirements of the on-call ticket, and then push that data back into the workflow upstream if that makes sense.
Louis, if I can elaborate on it, that's what
Sure.
is planned, but this ties into what I was talking about before, is that historically, there are a lot of different software and hardware systems out there. And in the industry, it's a well-known fact that they're all fragmented. So you might be using Leica or radio detection, but you weren't really capturing the data. If you required drone imagery, which a lot of these large projects utilized, you had a separate silo, which was Propeller. And then at some point, someone had to get that information into their system of record which in most cases for these government agencies, large construction companies and engineering surveying firms, they're either using Esri, which is the world leader in GIS, or they're using Autodesk or Bentley. And then when it came to the one call ticket process where you had to send a locator out there, the two leaders in the country for managing the one call tickets for the service providers are Earth and Cortera. These companies are now coming to us because they realize that number one, it's all about the data and that they need a mobile mapping solution, and they have selected Pointman. What we're doing is we're streamlining the process because we're integrating all of these systems into Pointman. So you have one single system, and that's never been done before. But because of the brand name awareness, these companies recognize that Pointman is the leader, and they're coming to us with the willingness to open up their API to us so that we have seamless integration. But it also creates an opportunity because they'll go back to their customers and offer Pointman as another service. So again, it's one of those major convergence point and catalyst where we have all these other software and hardware providers that are coming to us because we provide something of significant value that can streamline the process, but also enhance their software or hardware and provide an additional service to their customer. Next.
Thanks, Paige. That's super helpful. To just kind of close out here, outside of the sort of work we've been doing both on the hardware and software partnership side, we've also made a significant number of improvements to the software itself. Just to highlight a few of these, I think those two at the top are the most pertinent. One is in the next couple of weeks, we're going to launch an updated version of Pointman Plus that comes with I think first in the market for the sort of mobile only side is that the ability to keep backups for Plus customers in our cloud environment, right? So we did a lot of work earlier this year and late last year to sort of realign the cost structure of storing data in the cloud, and we've got it to such an efficient place that it allows us to provide some of that limited cloud backup functionality to our Plus customers. I think this is an important sort of quality of life change for Plus customers, especially as they're say moving between devices. The other, I think, important point of it is it also makes the upgrade process or the move is that if a customer on their journey with us starts, say, with Plus and then wants to move to Pro, by us, say, preceding all of that data into our cloud system to keep backups, it tremendously simplifies and streamlines the process that a customer has to undertake when they go from being a Plus customer to a Pro customer. There used to have to be some conversion work in some cases that had to be done. As this new goes live, that sort of an upgrade path for a customer actually becomes instant, right? So go to the e-commerce store, select the Pro plan rather than the Plus plan, basically complete the transaction. By the time you get back to the Pointman app, you'll have all of your data available from all of your Plus mobile devices available to you in the Pointman Pro cloud. The second major one is that second bullet point around Pointman Free. So we've always had a free version of Pointman available on the App Store, and we've actually instituted a bunch of usage and user reporting metrics over the last 4 or 5 months to try to understand what features are important to users. And so we're in the process of retooling that free version of Pointman, in particular, providing enough features in a sort of try before you buy manner to get folks comfortable with Pointman and being able to do things like test, like, hey, here's my GPS hardware, here's my locate hardware, making sure all of that works, but then also guiding them sort of on that journey from, hey, here's the free version, I can test it out, to moving towards providing value confirmation for a move from the free version into either Plus or Pro once they sort of get a basic understanding and have some time to work with Pointman to get comfortable with it. Maybe lastly, on the ease of use side, We've also, taken a bunch of feedback from customers on like, hey, as I'm using Pointman, as I'm setting up new projects, there was some pain points, things like, re-importing symbology, or hey, I'm a locating company and I've got, 4 or 5 people in the field, and so I'm using Plus today. Being able to manage those Plus users in an easy, sort of simplified way. What was some feedback we had heard late last year, and early this year from customers out in the field, and so we've also launched some additional products and some additional enhancements there to sort of again remove the friction from our users being able to use our product. So Paige, with that, I'll hand it back to you.
Okay, thank you. You can, Garrett, can you go down to the end? Are you at the end? There we go. So number one is I'd like to kind of just, recap is that, we developed a very, very robust product. We worked with several industry leaders, including, large construction companies, government agencies, some of the largest engineering surveying firms in the country. We worked with the equipment manufacturers. That allowed us to build out a very robust system with feedback from industry leaders. The one thing that we couldn't control is when would we get adoption in the market. And as I mentioned, we know the construction industry is slow to adoption, but we're starting to see catalysts in the market that indicate that the adoption has begun. I just came back from the World Damage Prevention Conference this week. I was there Monday through Wednesday. That's the largest damage prevention conference in the world. And the theme was digital transformation and digital mapping. And we had a booth there and we were busy. Normally it's herding cats where we have to go and find people that might be interested. There's utility locating companies and engineering companies and manufacturers. They were coming to us. In fact, as Lewis alluded to, we had a couple equipment manufacturers that people were looking at their equipment and asking them if it worked with Pointman. And of course, a couple of them it didn't, including StoneX and Mala. So they came over to our booth and said, hey, we know who you guys are. How quick can we integrate our hardware? And then of course we had the one call ticket providers there. It's an indication that things are changing in the market. And as opposed to having to consistently push our product into the market, we're starting to realize what we call the pull factor, where these companies realize that they have to have a mobile application and that precision is the key. There's competitive products out there, but there's no product out there that can provide the level of accuracy that we provide with such an easy to use solution, and in particular at the price point we have. And I think that's why we're starting to realize a significant increase in the amount of customers that we're onboarding in the first and going into even just the second quarter. As I mentioned, we've already onboarded more customers just this week than we've done in any previous time prior. What I have on here is the major catalysts that I'm very confident that we will achieve in 2024. We want to, number one, increase the adoption by DOTs. We've now been working with Colorado Department of Transportation for 5 years. And as a result of that, we've built the product out, Pointman specifically. We have a Pointman version that's for DOTs. It's been very successful with Colorado. We have several other states looking to adopt exactly what Colorado has done. In fact, about 2 months ago, we received an RFP from the state of Georgia DOT, and the RFP and the SOW they provided pretty much mirrors what we've done with CDOT, which makes sense because I know that they've had over 24 meetings with CDOT. Utah just indicated to us that they're waiting for a federal grant from the Federal Highway Association, and that they're going to provide that to us to do a pilot implementation for Utah. And we're also in discussions and have had several meetings with Pennsylvania DOT, including on site and also piloting in our product. And we've had several meetings also with California Department of Transportation, which is Caltrans. All of the DOTs are going to move to a centralized system that provides the ability to accurately locate where the utilities and pipelines are located on their right-of-ways. And I'm pretty confident that we're poised to capitalize because we are the leader and we are the first company to have a DOT that is implemented and mandated Point Man, and it's providing significant dividends for them. So one of the goals is to onboard 1 or 2 more DOTs this year. We also want to expand our relationship with Kiewit. We've been working with Kiewit now for 5 years. And again, based on the feedback that we had from them, we built the product out to meet their specific requirements, which would meet the requirements for almost all major infrastructure construction companies. We've had meeting at the C-level in Omaha, which is their headquarters, because we're now in 3 different regions and we've done over a dozen projects with them. We have the credibility that they'll now examine making Point Man as part of an enterprise offering, that it would just be on all the projects. We have a meeting set up for sometime in May. It actually got moved out from April, where we'll be sitting down with all 48 regional managers so that they can hear the success story from the regional managers in the other 3 regions, and then discuss pushing Point Man out as far as an enterprise offering where they would pay us a significant amount of money and then basically push this out onto all their projects. We also want to integrate into excavation guidance systems, and we are in discussions with the company called Xwatch right now, which has also integrated into Leica, where we would provide Point Man data and it would be integrated into the hydraulic systems and software systems within the excavation guidance equipment, where if they encroached on a utility or pipeline, they would receive warnings, and if it got too close, it would actually shut the equipment down. The company that we're working with right now is Leica, who provides that type of technology to Caterpillar, Komatsu, Volvo, John Deere. We've actually sent data to them. Lewis is working diligently with their team in Europe. One of the missing components was that they needed the data, and it obviously needed to be data that they can trust, especially if you're shutting down heavy equipment, on a project. You need to rely on that data. So I expect that at some point we'll be able to announce that we've integrated into Leica and the excavation guidance systems. Another major catalyst and goal of ours is to land a major international client through the hard work of Joel. One example is we're working with a group called Red Sea Global, and potentially having the opportunity to be the geospatial technology that is on the line, which is a 140-mile indoor city in Saudi Arabia. Pat's already been over there visiting with them. We actually introduced radio detection to them as far as the technology that they can be utilized. Both Pat and Lewis are cyber security experts, which is one of their concerns. So we're going through the due diligence process with them, but that's an example of a major international client that we would like to land. But we're also working with other organizations in other parts of the world. As you know, we've had adoption in Australia and in New Zealand and in parts of the UK. So we're starting to realize recognition in other parts of the world. In addition to Stake Center, as I mentioned, we want to land another national utility locating firm. I think, as I mentioned, we'll push out a press release that we've onboarded Stake Center. I think the next one is GridHawk, and we should be able to announce that, I would say, within the next 30 days. We also want to expand our relationship with radio detection and leverage their 80 salespeople. As I mentioned, there'll be collaborative marketing efforts that you should start to see over the next, I would say, 30 to 60 days, where radio detection starts to promote Point Man. They made it very clear with the new device that they have that has the GPS integrated into it, that PointMan is the software that all their salespeople are trained on, and that we're also in their training manuals. We also want to set up a distribution deals with the other equipment manufacturers that we're working with. For example, Bad Elf is working with us now. Leica also wants to start distributing PointMan with their equipment. So we also want to expand because those are significant distribution channels for us, not only in North America, but throughout the world. Lewis will be completing the integration into the major GIS and CAD system providers, as we mentioned, including Esri, Autodesk, and Bentley. This will streamline the process for large companies in order to take the data from the field and PointMan and just seamlessly get it into their GIS and CAD systems. That's a major milestone. And then, as we mentioned, we want to complete integration over the next quarter or two into the major one-call ticket system providers, which is Earth and Cortera. And then they're going to package this and provide PointMan as an additional service offering to their clients. For example, when I met with Cortera on Wednesday, they see that PointMan could be a GIS system of record for the smaller municipalities, and they have 600 municipal clients that they want to provide and offer PointMan to. So you can see that our focus is on significantly driving sales. We have a very robust product that we've developed over the last 10 years. Initially, it took us several years to get what we call early adoption from major influencers, which included Kiewit and CDOT and the major engineering and surveying firms. And as a result of that, built into the system all the business practices and workflow processes that met their requirements. And then over the last 24 months, we started to see a little bit of uptick in adoption in all of the industry sectors, as I mentioned, that are impacted by not knowing where utilities and pipelines are. But in Q1, we saw a significant spike in the amount of customers that we onboarded. It was about 24. And as Pat alluded to, our goal is, and we feel pretty confident, that we can add 30 by the end of this quarter. In fact, we're on track right now to do 12 this month, and each month it's consistently seems to be going up for multiple reasons. Number one, as I mentioned, the industry realizes we're going through a digital transformation, and they need a digital mapping system that is precise. But in addition to that, over the last several years, we've built a very robust pipeline of all of the potential clients that could utilize our technology. It was always just a question of when would they adopt this sort of technology. And, over the past years, we have become known as the leader, and we have significant brand awareness, not only in North America, but in other parts of the world. So I'm very confident and optimistic that we are going to see a significant increase in the amount of customers that we onboard. And obviously that reflects in revenue generation. And I think it's just going to finally be what I consider to be our year. And the proof will be in the pudding over the next couple quarters as we report. But I'm very optimistic and confident that we're going to see a significant increase in revenues, and that'll
Okay,
continue.
Paige, why don't we leave it there, because we've got 3 minutes left to the hour, and I think there's a few questions we want to get to.
Sounds
So
good.
there is some difficulty in getting construction permit issue or city or state to recognize and accept your reports. So Lewis, how do you think integrating with ticket management systems is going to help expedite the permitting process?
So I think there's actually two parts. I think integrating with the ticketing management systems, it definitely helps in that case in terms of it streamlines and standardizes sort of, I would say, new digital output. The other thing I didn't mention, maybe I should have earlier if I'd said in the question, was we definitely have some work planned later this year, maybe into early next year, around more robust deliverables that we can create directly from PointMan. I think the other thing we're alluding to here is that government bureaucracies tend to operate at their own speed, and so we definitely want to spend some time there working on how we can sort of bridge that gap on behalf of our customers.
Okay, and but just in terms of the actual permitting process, if all of the ticketing systems work with us, presumably this just makes the permitting process way faster, way more efficient, but it also implies that our data is money good. Is that a fair comment?
Correct, yes.
Okay. Is there a plan I know we have a few APIs going on. Can you just maybe talk about a few of the organizations that we might see some further integration with this year?
So I mean, so yeah, I mean, so you know, the biggest one we focused on are sort of, you know, the companies like Autodesk and Esri and Bentley. That being said, as we're building these APIs, I mean, we're not building tailor-made APIs for just those environments. These are sort of generic, you know, open APIs that can be used by you know, by any sort of any use case or any company where it makes the most sense to do that.
And Paige, this one's for you. Can you give us your thoughts on what we can see out of radio detection over 2024? Is this, in other words, I think what they're asking is this a monetizable relationship or not?
Yeah, it is. So initially what they did, Joel, is they started out, they're utilizing just our mobile app, which is what Lewis alluded to, is kind of like the starter kit, right? It's low cost. They initially bought 200 licenses from us, and then we provided their salesmen with the free version of it just so they could get acclimated on utilizing it and for training purposes. I actually asked them on Wednesday how many devices they sell, and they looked at me and they go, "That's sensitive information that we can't divulge." And I said, "Well, with the new RD 8200 SG," I go, "is it over 1,000?" And they said, "Oh yeah, we sell over 1,000 just in the US." The goal primarily isn't just through the monetization of, you know, the mobile app. What we want to do is capture that customer information so that we can upgrade them from the mobile app up to Pro. And that's really where we monetize it.
And I think, given that it's a little after 1 and people are starting to drop off, why don't we leave it there? If we haven't addressed any questions that you may have asked, we'll respond directly. Thank you very much, everyone. Paige, any closing remarks?
Other than, you know, I hope we demonstrated that the future looks bright for us and that we're starting to recognize traction, you know, in the market. And I expect our revenue and onboarding customers to continuously increase throughout the year. So we're excited.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
End the call.